We are 6 months away from the midterms, plenty of time in this unpredictable world of politics. But how are Republicans now handling President Trump, running toward him or away from him? Matt Mackowiak is president of the Potomac Strategy Group, a longtime friend of ours here on the program. Good morning to you, Matt.
Good morning.
You know, generally speaking, are Republicans running towards the president or away from him as we approach this midterm, considering how controversial he is?
It depends a little bit on the individual member and the district that they're in. In some districts, obviously, Trump is less popular. Suburban districts, in some cases, districts in places like California, New York, New Jersey, that are going to help to determine who has the majority of the House starting in 2019. The other factor to keep in mind is you have primaries that are still going on in most states. Texas is the first state in terms of primaries, and there are a few other states that have had primaries, but a lot of other states still have them. And so for a Republican member of Congress, who may be facing a primary, they don't really want to anger their primary electorate until the primary is behind them by attacking Trump. Now, I think the interesting thing to watch is going to be this fall, particularly if Trump remains unpopular, broadly speaking. Now, his numbers have been narrowly ticking upward from the mid to high 30s to the low 40s. And ideally, if he can get it to the mid 40s or even high 40s by the end of the year, I think there's a chance they could hold the House. But if Trump remains unpopular in some districts, one district, for example, would be the Will Hurd district, the 23rd congressional district that goes from San Antonio to West Texas. Those members are going to find ways to distance themselves from Trump or to differentiate themselves.
Let's talk about one specific race. Ted Cruz, Beto O'Rourke, Democratic congressman from El Paso, coming on strong. He was polling well 2 weeks ago. His fundraising numbers have been great. If you're advising the Cruz campaign, what are you telling him to do?
Well, I think a few things. If you're asking as it relates to Trump, it's pretty clear that Cruz and Trump are pretty closely aligned. I'm sure there's an issue here or there where they disagree, but really Cruz has been really supportive of President Trump. They've worked very closely together. Cruz has carried some water for the president up on Capitol Hill. And I think he's actually pretty comfortable with a lot of what Trump is doing from a policy standpoint, regulatory rollback, the tax cut, certainly the judicial nominations, which Cruz thinks is crucial. And then in a number of other areas. Look, Trump's numbers in Texas are weaker than a generic Republican's numbers should be, but I don't believe they're weak enough that Cruz feels like he needs to differentiate himself necessarily. I think he will. Yeah. He's obviously a different kind of Republican and a different kind of conservative than Trump is. But ultimately, this is going to be a base election. Midterms are always base elections. If you get your base out, you win. And for Cruz, he's shown in the past that he can get his base out, not just in his U.S. Senate election initially, but also in winning the Texas primary last March.
Is he vulnerable at all?
I don't believe he is. And I don't believe the Quinnipiac poll that showed Cruz up 47-44. It's the first time they've polled in Texas. If you look at 36% independence, is a ridiculous number. And they were testing registered voters, not likely voters. So I don't believe that poll is reality. Is the race closer than maybe it would be against another type of Democrat? Perhaps. Gotcha. O'Rourke has certainly raised a lot of money. In the most recent report, it shows he raised $7 million. People haven't paid attention to the fact that he spent $2.6 million to raise $7 million. So I think Cruz is getting ready to really go into overdrive here, particularly once the primary runoffs are over, and begin to define Beto O'Rourke. His record is pretty liberal. He's a fairly liberal member of Congress. Hasn't had significant legislative accomplishments. And I think the Cruz team believes O'Rourke is out of the mainstream of where most Texans are. And so I think you're going to see Cruz define O'Rourke. Certainly it could be an 8 or 10-point race. I don't believe it's going to be closer than that.
Interesting. We'll see how this unfolds after the summer vacations, obviously, as well. It's Matt Mackowiak, president of the Potomac Strategy Group. Matt, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Take care.